together and co-create the Africa we want and articulate that in a manifesto with a proposed vision for the African continent by the young global leaders of this continent from Africa and the diaspora. And it turned out to be quite successful. We worked for 2 years from 60 different locations around the world and collaborated to put together this manifesto that we presented at the World Economic Forum, actually, at the time, more than a decade ago, and then at the African Union. And the name was Africa 2.0 because we were really looking at building the next version of Africa, right? A prosperous, enlightened, and sustainable Africa. That's really the perspective we had. So I was living this double life, if you may, right? Hardcore investment banker, but with a social impact, of course, since I was with IFC World Bank, but also social entrepreneur, community leader, galvanizing not just my generation, but also pushing advocacy, because Africa 2.0 was like what you would call a think tank, right? A think tank that does things. So as we did that, we started engaging and pushing advocacy, and 3 years later, the African Union heads of state, I think 47 heads of state, ratified Agenda 2063, which proposed a 5 decades long-term vision for Africa. So for us, it was quite a victory. And, as I was managing director for GE, driving this international foundational organization and community, I felt the need of addressing somehow this schizophrenia, in terms of, how do you do business, right? But also bring consciousness and impact into the way you drive business. And that's how Ubuntu was born, because I was, of course, at the time, very familiar with ancient African philosophies and values. And the name Ubuntu means I am because we are, right? It kind of refers to the sense that you don't exist in isolation. Everything is interconnected. And that's really what I thought business and hardcore capitalism somehow had forgotten, that everything was interconnected. And how do we bring back, the humanity in everything, right? And the consciousness that we are all part of one. And that Ubuntu philosophy was really the blueprint of this whole Ubuntu group and venture. It started with advisory, where we had Ubuntu Capital, and we advised, leading organizations like European Investment Bank, European Union, African Development Bank, large funds into proposing new models of investment that combine financial and social return. And as we went through this journey, I realized that, yes, I felt like it was relevant, but I felt like it was not enough, right? And of course, the main challenge in those cases is, what is it that we really need to transform or shift to create that long-standing, sustainable, impactful change? And it came for me with understanding the gap that there is between African GDP per se, using modern Western metrics, and Africa's wealth, right? In a context where, you have a GDP at continent level that is at 2.1 trillion, but yet you have natural resources estimated at $100 trillion, right? So if we could reverse, right, the way this wealth is valued and monetized, then we could create a model of shared prosperity on one side. But by restoring the definition of wealth to natural capital, you also help people shift their mindset in understanding the wealth of what they truly have, whether it would be the Congo Basin, the underground resources and everything. So for me, it was a way to effectively, while you push financial inclusion and shared prosperity, you restore a consciousness of the true wealth that we came to this world with, which is what Mother Earth actually gives, right? And in that way, you shift from one of the fundamental principles of capitalism that was based on an economy of scarcity to another fundamental principle, universal principle that the planet offers, which is an economy based on abundance, right? the planet was here before us, and as a result, has always been providing, no matter what, right? So how do we now use economics, technology, finance by reorganizing the nature and the definition of wealth so that you see wealth in the air you breathe, in the assets underground, in the water you drink, by involving tokenization and real world asset tokenization. That's really where Ubuntu Tribe, as fintech company and financial platform, has really ventured into, and leveraging on the basic needs to actually shift the basic understanding of the world we live in.
Yeah. On this note, if I may, Mamadou, first of all, thank you very much for this inspirational introduction. I felt that your heart and your mind were navigating among different dimensions, right? From finances to corporate to nature-based instincts. Yeah. But I want to share an anecdote that I think contributes to this conversation, because myself, as a young diplomat in the early 90s, I was deployed in South Africa during the transition from the apartheid-based regime to the first ever presidential elections that fortunately put Nelson Mandela, in power. And I learned first about Ubuntu as a philosophy of, as an existential philosophy, right? So, I mean, why individuals exist on this planet, and why I am because we are. And so this is something I would like to have your perspective on, because you touched the point, but I think if we go a little bit deeper, it will be of much value to our audiences. So when we say I am because we are, this is a human-centric philosophy. It refers to human beings, right? But what I feel actually is that if we go one step farther and we equate humans and animals and vegetables and fishes and stars, I mean, everything that is in existence on this planet, right? And so we go one step farther, is that we as individuals exist because the ants and the bees also exist, you see? And that is, I think the paradigm shift that we need to instill in people in order to, avoid that somebody throws a plastic straw on a beach and doesn't feel that it's killing, humanity as a whole. How do you feel about this?
Look, I mean, you have a very, very solid point here, and it's good you bring it up, because that was the next point of the understanding Ubuntu, right? And it's funny indeed. I've had the privilege to know and